one of my values came from my upbringing, the way I look at the world, the way I think about things. And the truth is that as a child and into young adulthood, I didn't like zoos. I didn't like going to zoos. And part of the reason I didn't like going to zoos was because I lived in places around the world that had very, very poor zoos that didn't speak to or didn't articulate the issues around what purpose were they serving? How did they serve the animals that were there? How did they come into being? And it made me uncomfortable watching animals in circumstances that I didn't think really brought out the full glory of that animal, the beauty of that animal. And so in many ways, coming to the zoo, to Philadelphia Zoo, a great zoo, and one that I had come to see with my own children, was a wonderful zoo, but it also brought with me the notion that one of the first things that one has to keep in mind is to always have a view on the highest level of animal welfare and animal well-being. Yes, as zoos, our financial model comes from our visitors, but our responsibility is to the animals in our care. And if we are not taking care of those animals at the highest level, then our ability to be able to energize, to inspire our visitors into taking action for those animals would be compromised, because they too would feel what I was feeling as a child in the company and in the circumstances where I didn't think the zoo was doing the very best for those animals. And Outback was founded on a couple of principles. One that I've already mentioned, that learning from the way the cats used it and the way that it created enrichment for them, created a new way in which the cats could experience their world and see things differently, and the way that visitors reacted to it. We're also seeing a very specific and very profound business model attached to it, which I'll come back to in just a moment.
Please.
But the idea then was to begin to go through a series of pilot projects, and seeing what other species we could engage into this idea around the trail system. But it was rooted in a business concept. And the business concept was this, that while we are America's first zoo, and while we have been blessed to have, about 1.2 million visitors a year that come to the zoo, our footprint is relatively small. It's 42 acres. And as many of your subscribers may know, if they're with their own hometown zoos, that's a fairly dense zoo. And you think about 1.2 million visitors in an annual basis on 42 acres. And so for quite some time, there had been this move towards acquiring more space, more land, in order to expand. The problem is that the core business issue of the zoo is that it has a very high fixed cost base to operate. And it has a revenue base that can sometimes be fairly volatile based on things like weather, the visitors' perceptions, things like that. And so the last thing we wanted to do was add more fixed cost. And so instead of thinking in the 2 dimensions of space, we started to think in the 3 dimensions of space, and said, what if we could create a trail system that is actually above your head? And then once you start thinking in 3 dimension, you have limitless space. You actually can create as much space as you want. Exactly. And so one issue that the trail system helped us accomplish was we could create new experiences and new habitats without adding more land and more expense. We were also learning, how are the animals using it?
Right.
So, I mean, it's one thing to say this is how we think it'll work, but very quickly we were learning the animals are going like, this part I like, this part I don't like. This I'll use, this I won't use. And it was fascinating to watch that. And then also really fascinating to watch their evolution with the system. So for example, the animals that were introduced to the system reacted one way. The animals that were born into the system had an entirely different reaction. So if they were born at the zoo, and this is the system they knew, they used it in a completely different way than those that had never seen it before and go, well, this is a really entirely scary contraption here. I have no idea what it is. I'm going to test it very gingerly and see how I feel about it. So we were learning as we were going along, and our initial thought was, make it work for the animal. Don't worry about making it beautiful. Don't worry about all of that. Just make it work for the animal first, and then we can get the beauty of it, get the aesthetics of it to really come together. I would say we really did perfect it in the overhead trail for big cats that crosses our main path. It's the one that's most iconically attached to Philadelphia Zoo. It works beautifully for big cats. It's good and aesthetically beautiful to look at. But the early ones we built were not quite that well designed, because we were learning as we were going along from that perspective. You know, we are now 13 years into it, and so far so good. And the keepers have got a set of protocols around it and make sure that the timeshare system allows any animal to use the system voluntarily, but that there's no collision occurring where animals are meeting each other in a way that's unintentional.
Behavior that if one cat is smelling a new type of cat or a new type of animal because they were there before, do they have a reaction which is less than positives? Like, I don't know if I should trust this because maybe there's something lurking in the back ready to attack me, or that doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, it does. I mean, I think that that is that first of all, that's an excellent question, and it really does reflect the behavior of animals, which is they mark their territory. They mark what is theirs, and when the next one comes in to that timeshare, they're going, now wait a minute here, something's been in here before me. And there are two reactions that occur from that. One is immediate stress. And the question is that good stress or bad stress? Is that a stress that's positive in the longer term? It might not be positive in the first immediate instance because it gets them to look out and say, what's going on here? What's happening here? But in our view, in a zoo setting, those stresses can actually be good. They can actually create resilience. Right? If you're in a place where there are no natural predators around you, if you're in a place where everything is completely protected around you, there's no grit and resilience created in that animal. And one could say in a human being as well, right? If you're not constantly having that opportunity to check yourself. So we think that it actually creates greater resilience. It actually, an initial amount of stress, not long-term prolonged stress, but an initial amount of stress is actually quite good because it actually creates resilience. And this is part of some research we have done in the Zoo360 trail system, which is, how is this actually good for the animals, in addition to giving them the opportunity to explore? So it's creating physical exercise, which is physically good for them. Is it also good for them emotionally? Is it actually good for them in a way that makes them stronger, hardier, and the like? And we think yes. Trail system that we built for the gorillas, what we were seeing were that some of the older gorillas, particularly the Silverback, was not liking the trail system, in part because, as you know, gorillas walk on their knuckles, they walk on their hands, and the feeling of having that on something that was metal didn't feel right to them, and so to the Silverback, and so we had to put different things down, see if he would arrange it, and reluctantly he started to use the trail system from that perspective. but he did not like the feeling of the metal and the hardness on his knuckles to walk on that. So we had to put different materials down to make that possible. Fast forward to when he had 2 offspring. They went right into it. They walked on it, they hung on it, they swung on it. They were using the trail system in a different way. They were much smaller than the silverback. They were baby gorillas. They were able to see it in different ways. But for them, this was wide open space to explore. And the notion that you walk only on grass on an earth never occurred to them. So their ability to sort of walk on this was, for them, part of the multiple ways in which the environment offered them opportunities. The ultimate thing that we're learning is the vast expansion of enrichment in their lives. They're experiencing things that they never thought would be possible in a zoo environment. Leopard will go into one of these trail systems, and we will observe that they lock on to something that they're looking at. And that could be the goats in the children's zoo 100 yards away. They never knew there were goats 100 yards away from them. They may have smelled them, but they'd never seen them before. Now they're up there and seeing it. And how about one of our primates who love to sit up into the trail system and watch a construction site? Never knew that there was something working there, and be able to see it. In a zoo environment, you're bound by the environment that was handed to you, that was given to you. Now you've got a choice. You can go sit somewhere and watch something that's different. The amount of enrichment that occurred in the lives of these animals multiplied dramatically, increased dramatically. Now, zoos, one can say, still, yes, they keep animals in captive situations. Is that right? Is that not right? But the reality is, we've seen the value that zoos provide in being able to give individuals who will not travel to other parts of the world an ability to connect, to see things, and to appreciate their role in conservation and being able to make a difference. There is an important ambassadorial representation role that these animals play. The question is, how can we make their lives as enriching as possible in that environment? To set them free would be irresponsible. They don't have the skills or other things to do that. But for them to experience things much more broadly than what might be available in a small area is pretty significant from that perspective. This idea that was brand new in 2009 is in approximately 60 zoos across the world today in some fashion. So we are really excited to see this. And having come from the for-profit world that kept trade secrets and the like, I'm so pleased that in the zoo world, we share everything, open architecture, we share everything with any zoo. And we've been really honored that every month we have a zoo from somewhere in the world that comes and visits us to see what we've done and is interested in trying to implement it in their place. Many have used it point to point, not campus-wide as we have, but we're always open to that. The other point of pride for us is we had one of our conservation partners from Brazil come and see how we had used this trail system, and a light bulb went off for them on some work that they're doing around preservation of areas in the Atlantic coastal rainforest in Brazil that was really impacting a specific species of small primates known as golden lion tamarins. What was happening was, because of farming and the way the roads were being built, their habitat areas were getting fractionalized. And because the habitat areas were getting fractionalized, there was inbreeding that was occurring within those areas, and it was really impacting the long-term survivability of the golden lion tamarins, an issue that they were really concerned about. When they saw our trail system here in Philadelphia, they went back to Brazil and built a trail system over a major highway that connected multiple of these fractionalized areas. And now golden lion tamarins are traveling through these trail systems over the highway and not getting impacted or killed by this. So This
Yeah,
idea of movement is also being applied in the wild in a very different way to preserve it. And we were really excited to see that. And they were clear this idea came right from the Zoo360 concept.
So, Vic, you mentioned social justice and environmental justice. Philadelphia Zoo being a city zoo, 42 acres in an area which is has got a lot of development opportunities probably down the pike. How do you actually relate to the community, and how do you keep social and environmental kind of justice in play as from the zoo's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of the true learnings and lessons of being a zoo in an urban environment,
Mhm.
that there is this incredible opportunity not only to have individuals who may never travel to other parts of the world to see the amazing
Mhm.
biodiversity that's present in our planet and to see their role in making a difference from that perspective. But I think we've also come to learn that as we are embedded in the neighborhoods of West Philadelphia, we're actually surrounded by the neighborhoods that have actually got some of the most difficult challenges of
Mhm.
those that one sees in an urban environment.
Mhm.
Philadelphia has the highest poverty rate of any major city in the United States. And we happen to be in a part of the city that has the neighborhoods with some of the most difficult challenges. And those have translated themselves into issues around access, issues around transportation, employment, and other things. And it has become easy to think not our issue, not our problem. It's somebody else will deal with those. But if you believe what we say to others around the world, that you can only be as healthy as the ecosystem around you, the
Right.
same is true here. And so the Philadelphia Zoo has reached out in a number of different ways in which to engage more directly with the neighborhoods that are around the zoo. And those engagements have included things like youth education programs, neighborhood membership programs, opportunities to create businesses in the neighborhood that serve the zoo, so that there is a more balanced and symbiotic relationship between the zoo and the neighborhood around it. This, we think, is particularly important because as the population on this planet approaches 8 billion, the issues that we're seeing that are ultimately going to save animals around the world have to come from people. We're
Mhm.
not going to be able to create reserves and protected areas forever. We have to change behaviors. We have to change ways in which people look at how we use the resources that are given to us. And as a country that has less than 5% of the world's population, we use more than 25% of the world's resources.
Resources.
And it's so important that we become better stewards of the planet. And so
Mhm.
we think our role is to engage urban audiences, is to create ways in which they see their responsibility in this world. We inspire them with beautiful animals and wonderful opportunities, but we want to take them to action around understanding that environmental justice really is about engagement. It's really about being involved. And so for us at the Philadelphia Zoo, this is a really important part of our mission because we are that one destination in Philadelphia that has the most diverse audience base of any institution in Philadelphia. And so we have both the ability to reach a much more diverse group of folks, and we have the credibility and scale to make a difference. And we see that as an important part of our mission.